Well, he did a lot of good things at first. He got overly ambitious. For the U.S. Senate, remember that Eric had no chance to ever get. That's what I can actually explain. The FBI was listening.
Personally, I feel that way.
Oh, it's hot in here. George. It's hot already. Danny told me that he didn't give it, that he was wearing his hat. So.
And we have, let's say,
It is hot. Ooh, Betty. Should we have our
I think that's why we have this.
I will get you a copy that has the adoption.
that I'm taking this?
Someone to do the pledge.
I mean, I have my book.
Would you?
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, I don't.
But you'll do the Gary Chrisman version as opposed to the Thomas.
No, I do something grammatically correct. I was proud of Rotary today. They did it correctly.
Well, you've indoctrinated everybody. Well, we discussed it last week. I don't really care whether she cares whether.
I just didn't know if that was another reason.
What?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is George Wolf, I'm Lower Paxton Township's manager, and I'm going to summarize tonight's business meeting prior to the supervisors conducting business. Tonight's business meeting is a long agenda with many items of old and new business. Old business begins with action to fill a vacancy on the Board of Supervisors. Then the Board of Supervisors will act to appoint a board secretary and act to appoint a supervisor to the board's audit committee. The board will then consider a resolution that is designed to adopt a newly prepared Lower Paxton Township Comprehensive Plan. This resolution will be followed by a public hearing on the draft plan document. The board will then consider a request from Shealy Homes Incorporated for reconsideration of board planned action to draw upon financial security posted by the developer for public improvements in the Tuscan Villa development. The board will act to reaffirm an emergency declaration that the township manager issued last week for extreme wet weather conditions for July 21st through July 25th in our municipality. That will move on to a resolution authorizing the sale of firefighting apparatus from the township to the Colonial Park Fire Company. And then the board will act upon an ordinance that amends the volunteer service tax credit program, providing certain tax rebates, earned income tax and real estate tax to our volunteer firefighters. Under new business, there will be action on the PennDOT Municipal Winter Maintenance Agreement. By this agreement, Lower Paxton Township maintains certain state routes within our community for salt and anti-skid application, as well as plowing. The board will also act on a renewal of the emergency services agreement with South Central EMS for 2019. Both of these items are actually an initial part of our 2019 budget process. The board will then act to accept an automated red light enforcement program grant. This is for traffic signal improvements on Colonial Road and in the King George to Devonshire Road area. Then the board will also act on proposals for surveying services in the Beaver Creek sanitary sewer mini basins. And then finally, the board will act on a resolution that will authorize the sale of 4 municipal vehicles at the Manheim Auto Auction. Under subdivision and land development, there is one plan this evening. This is the preliminary final subdivision plan for Red Lobster. Red Lobster is currently located on the Colonial Park Mall parcel. This subdivision plan will put Red Lobster on its own parcel of land. That completes my summary of tonight's business meeting agenda. Of course, the supervisors are at the podium and ready to conduct business.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. We'll call this meeting of the Lower Paxton Township Board of Supervisors to order. I would like to ask everyone to please stand, and Mr. Chrisman will lead us in the pledge to the flag.
Please stand. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have before us approval of the minutes of the meeting of March 20th, 2018. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of March 20th, 2018?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the minutes of March 20th, 2018 as prepared and circulated.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any comment? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Before we proceed to public comment, a couple of points. First of all, prior to this meeting, the Board of Supervisors met in executive session, and we discussed a number of personnel issues, and we received scheduling information from the township manager. I would also like to point out before we begin our agenda this evening, as you can see, we have a full house, and Mr. Wolf has outlined what is a very aggressive agenda with numerous items on it. To that end, I would refer to the guidelines for comment. It says public comment, but this will be comment for anybody who wishes to speak tonight. The guidelines set a limit of 5 minutes. I would ask people to please be respectful of the fact that we have numerous of items. We have members of the public who are here who I understand want to address various items on the agenda. And when you make comments, if you could please get to the point, keep them brief, so that we can hear from as many people as wish to speak this evening, and also hopefully get out of here before midnight. So with that, is there any member of the public who would like to address an item not on the agenda tonight?
Okay, John.
John Tress, 600 Prince Street. I'm here tonight to find out when exactly there's going to be a public announcement of the meetings for the stormwater fee that's coming in January, because I would like to hope that this place would be this packed then, because I have a lot of questions that I think need to be answered before Rotella continues doing what they're doing, because of what we've already been paying for the last 10 years and what we're going to be charged. I think it equals the total sum. And if I'm incorrect, I'll be incorrect. But do we have any idea? I mean, the letter came out in the sewer bill that there's going to be numerous meetings.
We're going to have at least our consultant. I guess we're going to get at least 6 public meetings. It's not going to be initiated in January, so we're going to have lots of public meetings.
I just want to make sure.
We're trying to set up the schedule. The way we're doing it, and we're going to talk about this more in detail, I think, at our next meeting as far as the outreach. We're trying to set it up where we'll have a certain amount of general public meetings, and then we're going to have some just for certain stakeholders, the school district, which has a massive amount of property, various businesses and large property owners, and then we're going to have general public. We're going to have walk-in opportunities where you just come in during the day, and we'll have experts here to talk about it. So we will have multiple public meetings. We're working on exactly who the stakeholders will be, when are the best dates to do it, but nothing's going to be imposed in January.
Well, I contacted Gene Davis down in Philadelphia, who's in charge of the federal emergency management for EPA, for stormwater. And as far as the federal people are concerned, there's been no changes to increase what we're paying. But, I mean, I understand that, so that'll be answered, so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
we are going to discuss it more next week.
The person with the state has failed to return any of my calls, so.
Well, yeah, it's a federal and state mandate, and believe me,
understand that.
we're no happier about it than you are.
I understand.
Rather than try to start over every time we talk about it, if you have access to the internet, we set up a special page, and on the home page of the website, we have a nice big graphic so you can find it easily. It has all the background. We're going to keep adding information to it, but it has a
Some of
general.
those sites that are on there, when you go there, it says you need special access to get to it.
On our site?
Yeah, underneath the memos, there's.
Yeah, no,
EPA.
just on the home page. You don't have to go anywhere. On the home page, click on it. You'll
Okay,
find it.
well, I'd rather somebody of authority speak to whoever's interested.
Right.
So that.
We'll do that
It's just
too.
not me, because sometimes I get confused, and I don't want to argue with you guys. But I've told you before, I want what's right for everybody here in the township.
Right.
Well, there, like we say, we will be discussing it more next week, and there will be 6 public meetings, and I'm sure we're going to be discussing it at many meetings before it takes effect. So, yes, that is a major item. Any other member of the public wish on an item not on the agenda? Yes, sir. Yep. Bill?
Yeah, my name is Bill Bostic, 6204 Elmer Avenue in Linglestown. I just want to ask the supervisors to consider working with the Public Safety Department on how to implement a new state law regarding the firing of consumer-grade aerial fireworks. There's been a number of neighborhoods in the township that beyond July 4th, there was a lot of fireworks being shot off deep into the evening. In most of Linglestown area and Lower Paxton, if you're doing that, you're probably in violation of the state law because you have to be beyond 50 yards or 150 feet from an occupied structure or business building. I think something to that effect. So again, with like a stormwater, something coming down from the state, but we're going to have to figure out how to implement it. So with Labor Day coming up, I would just ask that we work with public safety and figure out how we're going to do it here in Lower Paxton.
Well, Bill, I've been thinking about that. I've been hearing people about it, and I've been watching my dog have his panic attacks every night. And I would like to, and I think the chairman agrees, that we'll just have an agenda one night. We'll put it on the agenda and get the proper people here to speak about what people can do, what they can't do, because it's true, there is a new state law in effect, and I don't know if that's what's driving the increased fireworks or not, but it seems to be more than normal, and it's something we can talk about.
Yeah, we can get Mr. Koshiba here and do it during a workshap when we can have more discussion on it.
Yeah, because I think we're all having complaints and they're happening in our own neighborhood, so.
Board members, the one thing I will note is that when it occurs is the time to notify police and make a phone call. I have myself noticed on social media many of the complaints that occurred, and oftentimes they were after the fireworks were displayed. You can't do enforcement after they're gone. Enforcement has to occur at the time that the police officer has to witness, has to arrive on scene, has to identify the property. So part of what we need to discuss is not so much what we can and can't do, is we have to educate our community on what they should do when they have or are disturbed by these fireworks.
Mr. Wolf, when is the next newsletter going out?
Next newsletter is just gone out.
Oh, okay.
And
I thought maybe we could add something so people could read it.
this
and
is
knew
going to
that-
have to be a newsletter item for probably next spring,
Okay.
as we get it'll hit the streets, so it's in time for the summer season.
Could we maybe have Leanne put something on the webpage, do the Facebook, just letting the residents know what is allowed and what is not allowed? You know, because they have to be so far away from people's properties.
Sure.
Yeah.
Any additional public comment on an item not on the agenda this evening? Okay. Seeing none, the chairman has no comments at this time. Board members, any comments you wish to make?
I would just like to thank the Parks and Recreation Department, Terry Barknight and Barb Gayante, for the concert that we had on Friday night. Unfortunately, it couldn't be held at Heroes Grove. We were inside. And this Friday night, the Variety Band, the Lower Paxton Variety Band, will be playing at Heroes Grove, and hopefully it won't rain. And just a reminder that September the 16th, we have another Cops, Cars, and Coffee out at George Park from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m.
And Night Out, we should
Any
just,
comment on Night Out?
it rained, the rain stopped, people came out. So for the police, the firefighters, and all the volunteers that made that happen, just thank you so much. It's always a popular event. And for those who stuck it out, I hope you got some enjoyment out of it, and we'll hope for better weather next year, but it takes a lot of work to set up and break down, and I just really appreciate it.
And I just want to thank our Public Works Department. I know they have their work cut out for them from last night, so we have a lot of gullies to fix in the fields, but they'll do a great job.
Yeah, the baseball field's going to need some work after last night. At this point, the retired manager's report.
Board members, just one quick item because of our agenda length. The board's budget workshop meeting, which is currently advertised for next Tuesday night at 4:30 p.m. The board has graciously agreed to move that to the 21st, beginning at 5 p.m., August 21st at 5 p.m., and that's to accommodate a scheduling issue that I have, and I do appreciate that. So your first budget workshop will be the 21st at 5 p.m.
Okay, thank you. With that, we will move on to old business, and first item that we are going to discuss is action to fill a vacant seat on the Board of Supervisors. As we all know, our dear friend and colleague, Mr. Hawk, passed away on July 14th. It is the sad duty of this board to take action now to fill the seat that Mr. Hawk so ably served in for, 22 years, I believe? By law, we had to do that. We have to do that within 30 days. That 30-day period will be up here this weekend. So this is the only meeting that we really have by virtue of the way the calendar fell. There were 5 Tuesdays in July, so we had an extended period of time between meetings. We did, the day after Mr. Hawk's funeral, post a notice on the township website indicating that we were accepting letters of interest and resumes. We received 7 or 8, which was not an overly large number of applicants. A number of the applicants were not really aware of what the position involved and withdrew from consideration. The resumes and cover letters were distributed to the 4 remaining members of the Board of Supervisors. We then undertook to contact them. I know Mrs. Lindsay talked with just about everybody.
Yeah. And the ones that I knew personally, I did not have to call, but I did call all the other ones that I did not know.
Yeah, there were several who were well known to us, so there was really not a reason to have a discussion. A number of us met with, I know Mr. Judd, myself, Mrs. Lindsay, we met with applicants who requested that we meet with them. Several of them called the township building and asked for calls, which were returned to them. So that was the process, which, by the way, is a process that we patterned after how the Court of Common Pleas fills vacancies for county commissioner at the county level, where in that case, if there's a vacancy for county commissioner, the court and bank, all the judges select that replacement, and they accept resumes and they accept letters of interest. Then they allow for people to visit them, or they can proactively talk to who they want. Then they meet and bank as a group and cast a vote as to whom they want to fill the seat. So that would be the process that we followed. So at this point, is there any public comment before we entertain any motion? Mrs. Scheib.
Good evening. My name is Katie Scheib, 131 Oak Park Road, here in Lower Paxton Township. And I do appreciate the full description of how the supervisors went through their process. If I may ask Solicitor Stein one question, Chairman Henry mentioned that there was a 30-day period in which an appointment must be made, and I understand that we are in day 25 of that 30-day period. What happens in the 15 days following that 30-day?
The vacancy board would have to meet.
And could you explain the vacancy board, please?
It's the 4 remaining supervisors plus the vacancy board chairman.
Okay, so essentially, tonight is not the deadline for this decision to be made, and that's my public comment. Tonight is not the deadline. My second question of Solicitor Stein, was there anything that would have precluded a special meeting advertised by the Board of Supervisors since the last regularly scheduled meeting where I requested the process and the criteria and the timeline that the supervisors were going to use to select the appointed vacancy candidate?
Yeah. I don't know the answer to that question. It depends on availability of the board.
And,
If they could schedule a special meeting.
and I would add that during the last 2 weeks, all 4 members of the Board of Supervisors were away on vacation at some point, which was scheduled because, as I mentioned, we had a 5 Tuesday month, which gave us an extra long period of time, and members of this board wanting to take their vacations at a time when they don't miss meetings, schedule that. So that's why, one of the reasons why we did not schedule a special meeting. In our view, one was not needed, and in our view, we are going to make the decision this evening.
Okay, so the statement's made, a special meeting was not needed, and you're going to make the decision this evening.
I believe that's what I just said, yes.
Okay.
I'm glad you understood that.
I wanted to clarify, because I do, again, want to emphasize that tonight is not the deadline for the supervisors to make a meeting.
You are incorrect. It is a deadline for the supervisors to make a meeting.
The Board of Elections,
However,
excuse me.
well,
I don't want to debate you, Mr. Henry. I'm
I
just
don't
making
care
a
whether you
public
wish to debate, Mrs. Scheib. I am answering the question.
I didn't have one.
Well, yes, you did. Now, I am answering the question. If you want to talk about the Board of Elections, then maybe you should go talk about the fine that you still owe them for your violation of campaign expense law last year. So do not lecture me about the Board of Elections when you can't follow the law and then pay the fine when you violate it.
Okay.
Our decision was that we are going to make the meeting tonight.
Okay.
And this is the deadline for the 4 members of the Board of Supervisors to make the decision. Should the 4 of us be unable to come to an agreement, i.e. 3 of the 4 be behind one candidate, at that point, then the 15 days kick in, and the vacancy board chairman would convene a meeting, and the 5 of us would then decide when we have an odd number. We do not believe it's necessary, nor is it a good idea to proceed to that point. So it is our decision that we are making a decision this evening.
Okay. Then if we're exchanging questions and answers as opposed to comments, may I ask Chairman Henry a direct question, and also Supervisor Judd? As candidates, you had a number of significant desires that you would like to see conducted on this Board of Supervisors were you elected. And the word that you used over and over and over again was transparency.
You are correct. And this
This
board...
is the easiest decision
This is
to include
Mrs.
the
Scheib.
public.
Number one, this is not a campaign debate. You may take your campaign elsewhere.
And not making a campaign
Number
debate.
two, if you want to talk about transparency, this board has gone above and beyond virtually every other municipality in this state when it comes to transparency in terms of what we put on our website, the social media that we have been ramping up since we were elected, and we have numerous other things that are in the process. So if you want to have a discussion about transparency, we will have it. This process is wholly transparent. This process There are no guidelines for it. It is solely at the discretion of the Board of Supervisors how to proceed. And we set forth the process patterned after what judges do to make a judicial decision at the county level. So I think it's a tried and true method that's used all over the Commonwealth. That's what we patterned on. Now, you may or may not like it, but that's what we are doing.
Okay, understood. And then I will just express my comment that as a resident of Lower Paxton Township, I do not like it.
Well, thank you very much. There are 50,000 residents, and we'll take your one opinion into consideration. Would anybody else like to address the board on the issue? Would anybody else like to address the board on the issue? At which point, the chair will open the floor for a nomination to fill the seat on the Township Board of Supervisors.
Mr. Chairman, I will ask my fellow board members to nominate Mr. Norman Zumas. As you mentioned, we didn't get a whole lot of applicants, but we considered them all. And you have to think about the seat that's being filled. Mr. Bill Hawk, he was honest. He was straightforward. He didn't grandstand. He didn't like BS. And I think we were fortunate to find someone who fits that bill. I don't know Mr. Zumas very well, but let me just give you a little bit of his background. Made me feel good about finding someone who is active in the community and understands, I believe, if you get up on this board, as you can see, we've got a pretty crowded agenda tonight. There's a lot of work to do. It's not always sexy. It's not controversial always, but it's got to be done. And you need someone who's committed to the community, not interested in grandstanding, and it's just going to do the grunt work that needs to be done. And I think you should know about his community involvement. That made me feel better, someone who knows the community. Just briefly, Mr. Zumas is vice president of the Dauphin County Heroes Grove Committee, active in American Legion, Harrisburg Hunters and Anglers Association. Was a member of the Occupational Advisory Committee for Dauphin County Technical School. That's a very important committee. I was a member of that, the Tech School Board, and that's a very important committee. Also, Mr. Zumas is a veteran. We don't have any veterans up here. I don't know how many veterans we've had in the history of the board, but I think that's important. He served in the U.S. Army National Guard, received the Pennsylvania Commendation Medal, U.S. Army Meritorious Service Medal, U.S. Army Accommodation Medal. In addition, he worked for a very prominent local business, Hoppin Ford, for 20 years, which is a company I think that people know. And for the last couple of years served as a district aide to State Representative Ron Marsico with constituent outreach and attending many functions. We've had him here before the board. I think I saw him one night at Linglestown Fire Company's fundraiser or the banquet. So he's out and about. He's connected to the community. And I think among the applicants, and again, there weren't too many, but among the applicants, I feel really good that Mr. Hawk would approve, that this is someone that I haven't heard a bad word about him. Like I said, I don't know him well, but I've heard only good things. And all I look for is honesty and integrity and the willing to put in the time to do the things that have to be done. Again, they may not be high-profile things, but they do take time, they do take research. So I would feel very comfortable nominating Mr. Norman Zumas.
The name of Norm Zumas has been placed into nomination for appointment to the Board of Township Supervisors. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, I'll second the nomination.
The nomination has been seconded. Are there any other nominations? Any discussion or questions from members of the board? With that, all in favor of appointing Norm Zumas to the Board of Supervisors, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? 4 votes having been cast in the affirmative. Mr. Zumas, you are hereby appointed Township Supervisor. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Stand up so everybody can see you. Now, what we are going to do, one of the areas where the law was a bit vague, and Mr. Stein and I had a conversation about this, the law requires that we fill the seat within 30 days. That 30 days will elapse between now and our next meeting. So tomorrow morning, we have reserve time with the Magisterial District Judge Lindsay to do a private swearing in, but next Tuesday evening, we will do a public swearing in so that Mr. Zumas can have his family and friends here, and members of the Lower Paxton community can see and hear from their new supervisor. So that way we will be certain that we comply with the law, but also we want to do the appropriate ceremonial function as well. So are you free tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock? Okay, good. Thank you.
If not, you are now.
If not, you are now, right. Now, the other, there's a couple of, Mr. Hawk left rather big shoes to fill. He served as Secretary of the Board of Supervisors, so it is now incumbent upon us to appoint a new Board Secretary. So the Chair will open the floor to a motion to appoint a Secretary of the Board of Supervisors.
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Chair-
Oh.
oh.
Go ahead.
Go
Mr.
ahead,
Chairman,
Mrs.
I would
Lindsay.
like to appoint Chris Judd as the Secretary of the Board of the Lower Paxton Supervisors.
I'll second that motion.
It has been moved and seconded that we appoint Supervisor Judd as our Secretary. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations, Mr. Judd. More work. But hold on. Mr. Hawk also served on the Audit Committee. How many supervisors, Gary? 2?
There are 2 supervisors who sit on the audit committee.
You
It
being
was
one.
Mr. Hawk and myself, and I serve as the chairman for the audit committee.
So we must appoint a supervisor to serve on the Audit Committee, so the Chair will open the floor for appointment of a supervisor to the Audit Committee.
Mr. Chairman, I think since Mr. Judd is relatively new and needs to get his feet wet, I would nominate him to serve.
I'm not going to be the new guy for long.
To accept the appointment to serve on the audit committee.
It has been moved that we appoint Supervisor Judd to the Audit Committee. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Well, you've added a number of new titles. Yeah, okay, now, another major item of business is item D, Resolution 1831, and this is to adopt the newly prepared comprehensive plan. I see that we have our consultant, Mr. Schmiel, with us. We have the chairman of the Township Planning Commission with us, Mr. Leidy, as well as numerous members of the Planning Commission who have been working for how long on this, Fred? A couple of years?
Yeah, almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years. Of course, the Planning Commission did hold its required public hearing on this. So, Mr. Stein, I will turn this over to you.
Did you want to hear from Mr. Schmiel as an introduction before we do the public?
Yes, we can hear from Mr. Schmiel, or Schmel? Schmel. Want to get it right, Mr. Schmel. I would refer you back to my 5-minute limit.
I totally understand. I understand there's a lot on the agenda.
With no expectation that you will hold to that due to the complexity of this subject, but if you would be so kind as to give those here and our audience watching an overview.
Okay. Again, my name is Charlie Schmel with a firm called Urban Research and Development Corporation in Bethlehem, who's been working with the township on this project. The comprehensive plan is an overall guide of policies for the preservation and conservation of the township over the next 10 to 15 years. It addresses transportation needs, community facilities, natural feature preservation, land use and housing, and ways to carry out the plan. It is not a regulation by itself, but it provides recommendations for township development regulation updates. There were some copies of a summary of the plan at the back table. And I wanted to highlight just a couple things that are major policy matters. The plan is not a revolutionary change from what is currently in effect, mainly because much of the township is either developed or approved for development. So it's pretty much set. But we did concentrate on alternatives of the areas most subject to change. A lot of mapping was done, as you see around the back of the room. A lot of information was analyzed, and a lot of discussions were occurring, particularly at the Planning Commission workshop meetings. There will be, assuming the township moves forward on a zoning update, there will be additional meetings on that, and this again is not a regulation by itself. Take me a second to see if I can get this back up again. The one change was, I had it up, and let's see if I can get it up again. 8. Okay, here it is. There it is. Okay. This is Linglestown Road, which has been the subject of a lot of attention, concerns about congestion along the corridor and the proper uses of land along it. One of the recommendations for change is to add what we're calling village residential on the north side of Linglestown. The intent is to have an opportunity for traditional forms of housing to be built that could extend the village to the north and help provide a stronger customer base to support the businesses in Linglestown. Secondly, the plan looks at an area of land that is north of 81. This is Wolfensberger Park in the green. This is the Beaver Creek, which is the township border. The plan recommends adding some additional low-density residential development in this area with the intent that this would be an efficient extension of the sewer system and would provide some additional opportunities for future residential growth. We also hope that would encourage a land trade to make the Wolfensberger Park boundaries more logical, because right now they're pretty inefficient. The next change I wanted to highlight is over near the interchange of 83 and 81. On the north side of that, on Crumbs Mill Road, there is Business Campus, which is a business park category on the west side of Crumbs Mill Road. The plan recommends adding some on the east side of Crumbs Mill Road, north of 81, but to retain residential land use next to existing homes. The plan talks a lot about ways to strengthen the Route 22 corridor as a business corridor, make it more attractive, make it more functional, make it easier for people to cross it, pedestrians to cross the road. There's particular attention about strengthening the western part of Route 22 west of 83, and then looking at an opportunity for some of the larger commercial areas to have a residential component in a larger commercial complex. For instance, if one of the anchors in the Colonial Park Mall would be replaced with some multi-family units that would be integrated into the project, that would be coordinated with proper shared parking and pedestrian connections. That's a trend that's being done throughout the country in many, many older shopping centers. They're looking to expand the uses allowed in older shopping centers and revitalize them by having a strong customer base nearby and provide the income to help do renovations to make them more modern, more efficient, more attractive to businesses and customers. We also highlighted the Kmart site as another opportunity. I know there's a new tenant moving in there, but long term, there might be an opportunity for a mix of some commercial in the front, residential in the back, and that residential would be very marketable because of the proximity of the Friendship Center and Brightbill Park. Those are the highlights. We did receive some comments from the County Planning Commission. We gave you about 4 pages of additions to the text. There's copies in front of the supervisors in italics. They did not change any of the policies that we discussed. They were more elaborations that the county asked us to add. With that in mind, we would like to hear any questions and comments.
Do we need to open the hearing for questions and comments?
I think we might mean, are there any questions?
From the board first?
Right.
Do board members have any questions or comments? No. Mr. Schmel.
Because
I'll
Well,
get it right this time.
Thank you, Charlie, for all your hard work.
We had a really great planning commission to work with, and a lot of help from the staff.
Right. And just to comment from those of us who are sitting here, we've attended many of those planning meetings, so it's not a case where we're receiving this for the very first time. We have had direct input when you've had your meetings with both the committee and the public that has been invited along the process. So thank you very, very much. I appreciate that. And especially for community input and for our team who worked with you in this over the 2 years. So thank you very, very much.
And Charlie, the county wrote, or they suggested that maybe it was a little too detailed in parts. And we responded, Planning Commission, that, well, there's not a lot left to be developed, and that there's enough, in the end, there's enough wiggle room, I guess, as long as you follow the general consensus. Is that, how often is it when a county suggests a change, and a township opts not to adopt it? Is that common?
The county provides a lot of comments. We responded to all of them except making the plan more generalized. It was not obligated that you make that change. We talked with your solicitor and staff on that matter. The planning code requires that any zoning change be generally consistent with the plan. It does not require things to be exactly as shown on this map. There is room to make revisions. Generally consistent is a very broad term. It's defined as consistent in a general manner in the planning code, something like that. So there's still a lot of room for debate and discussion. We wanted to be as specific as possible, though, so we weren't re-debating the same issue 4 times.
Right.
So if we made a decision at the planning commission, we wanted to show it on the map.
Okay. Well, given the lengthy process that was undertaken to produce this, I agree with you.
Any other board member? Robin?
Well, I just had another question. You had said about 22, and I know this was discussed at one of the meetings about, making it easier to go back and forth on 22. So was that with sidewalks also and with crosswalks?
There was some difference of opinion amongst the planning commission on whether sidewalks are a good idea on Route 22 because it would not be continuous and because there's a lot of high-speed driveway crossings. So there was some difference of opinion. But the idea of there's going to be people crossing 22 in any case, particularly bus riders, because by necessity, they need to cross. So the plan recommends working with PennDOT to try to get some of the lower traffic signals, the ones that do not have extremely high turning volumes.
Right. I know we had talked about that. I
At
just
those-
wanted to refresh my
at
memory.
at those intersections, looking towards a pedestrian refuge island. It's a place where you don't have to cross all the lanes of traffic at one time. You have a concrete median with some protection, and you only have to cross one direction of traffic at a time. It just makes it safer for people, particularly people who don't move very fast.
Okay. 'Cause I know we're having a lot of people that are walking and a lot of motorized wheelchairs on 22, so, okay. Thank you.
Charlie, just if I may, please. Yes, sir. One of the things that I am particularly pleased about, and I know that our planning commission worked hard on this, and this is one that has bothered me for a long time, but I'm glad to see that we are in the forward and we are looking at the future, especially at the shopping centers where we know the trend is going across the United States, and I'm happy that we're ahead of the game and we're playing offense rather than playing defense in this particular area. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the members of the Planning Commission. I know that they were mentioned, but those of you who are the Planning Commission, would you please stand up? I think you guys need to be recognized. I know I don't want to embarrass you, but
Oh, why not?
why not? But you guys have worked so hard. Thank you. Yeah. So anyway, I did want to applaud that effort because I think that's a major effort that every community will be facing. I'm glad that we're playing offense in this area.
And one of the intents is to put the zoning in effect so that it attracts investment. So people
Exactly.
want
Yes.
to invest in the Colonial Park Mall and other older commercial areas and want to renovate them. And they know that the zoning's in place. They don't have to ask for it.
Exactly. So thank you.
And now, Mr. Stein, you may conduct the hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the time and date set for the public hearing on Resolution 18-31, which would adopt the newly prepared comprehensive plan. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to be heard on Resolution 18-31?
No one? Oh, I think he's. Someone.
Sir?
My name is Jeff Kaiser. I live at 2350 Timberline Court. I have a very specific question. I abut an AR zone that's not currently developed, and I noticed in the plan that there is an open space option available in that zoning that would increase the density approximately 20%. My question is, if a developer would come before the board and request the open space option, would it trigger a notification of the surrounding landowners?
As currently drafted, yes, because it is a zoning map change that's required under the current ordinance. The process could conceivably change to make it an easier process to do. And then in that case, it will be up to the township whether they notify property owners. But one of the reasons why the open space option exists is so you can look carefully at where the homes are located and you can consider how it fits in with the adjacent homes.
Understood. My follow-up question is, the area where I live is serviced by wells. When you look into something like that, do you consider the water supply? Or would you allow a water tank to be built?
Typically, if you have any lot size smaller than an acre, you need public water and public sewer. And the township could require a water hydrogeologic study if there's a question about the ability to handle a well system.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Mrs. Shive.
State my name, Katie Shive, 131 Oak Park Road here in Harrisburg. And I did attend a couple of the comprehensive plan meetings, and I do want to give kudos to the Planning Commission for keeping everything moving along as I think it should have. One of the comments or observations that I made during the meetings is while there were a number of general public folks there, there were also a lot of small and larger developers that were there in a way kind of lobbying for what they'd like to see happen with their properties in the future. So my question, recognizing that the Planning Commission is the first line of defense when a developer comes for a change in zoning, such as we've been seeing in the last couple years, do the Board of Supervisors feel that this comprehensive plan, instead of being put on a shelf, will actually minimize, at least in the near future, special requests for rezoning and for variances? And if not, do you feel that you'll take a more solid line to validate this comprehensive plan by erring on the side of sticking to it as opposed to varying and changing it? Does that make sense?
Yes, there's a reason for a comprehensive plan, which is that it's to be the overall roadmap, obviously, for where we go in the future. Whether a hard line, as you put it, would be taken or not, my personal belief is each request needs to be evaluated on its own merits. And each request comes before us, goes before the Planning Commission, perhaps the Zoning Hearing Board. There are appropriate hearings and meetings that accompany all those requests, and they are, of course, discussed here at workshop and then voted on in public meeting. So, every landowner, somebody who is a developer or a private citizen just subdividing a lot into 2 or 3 parcels, has a right to come before us and ask us for whatever variances they wish. That doesn't mean we have to grant them, but landowners and developers have rights as well, and we must evaluate their requests on a case-by-case basis. So, as a general rule, yes, we're going to follow the plan. Otherwise, why would we have spent all the time, money, and effort developing it? But each case will be decided on its own merit.
Board members, I would also like to note that The comprehensive plan is a first step in a process that also will then not require, typically you do, and we have always done this. So do a comprehensive look at our zoning ordinance and amend our zoning ordinance where necessary to update our comprehensive plan, to comply with our comprehensive plan. Typically, the zoning ordinance would be something that we would start next year, and it will be a process that would follow similar to the comprehensive plan. After the zoning ordinance, the board will also look at subdivision land development regulations and its sewage enforcement regulations to make sure that they also comply with the new comprehensive plan document. When we adopted the plan in 2003, we amended the zoning ordinance in 2006 and the subdivision and land development regulations and the sewage facilities regulations a year or so thereafter. That same process will be followed with this comprehensive plan, I am sure, and this is just a first step in the land use regulation process.
And I want to, just to be clear, and I don't want to mislead anybody, their developers are there, all property owners, big and small, were there. I don't want people to think that, they were successful in lobbying to get things changed. Everybody was there to state their opinion. I mean, there's a reason why we just gave a round of applause for the Planning Commission and the respected professionals that helped us with this, is that they're not going to be pushed around by developers, and the developers know that. So I just to tamp down the cynicism a little bit, this was a thorough process. It was very open. It was right there in front of everybody. Sometimes developers had good ideas, sometimes they didn't. But I think it was a collaboration with every property owner, big and small. It was right there for all to see, and I just don't want people to be misled about what happened. And it was there was nothing untoward or anything like that.
Okay, thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for the explanation.
Is there anyone else that wishes to be heard on Resolution 18-31? Seeing no further response, Mr. Chairman, it would be in order at this time to close the public hearing on Resolution 18-31, and the board may take action if it so desires.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Before we take action, I would like to echo the sentiments that have been expressed by Mr. Chrisman and Mr. Judd and Mrs. Lindsay. Our great appreciation to the Planning Commission, 2 years worth of effort. I was here for the Planning Commission's hearing, and the Planning Commission got a standing ovation at the end of it, which I don't think anybody's ever given a comprehensive plan a standing ovation before. So congratulations to you, to Mr. Schmel, to our staff, and to all the citizens who came, because there were many, many, many who came and had input into this. It truly was a community effort. And we have one more step to take. With that, I will open the floor for a motion on Resolution 1831.
Mr. Chairman, I am pleased to recommend the adoption of Resolution 2018-31 to adopt the new comprehensive plan for Lower Paxton Township.
It has been moved that we adopt Resolution 2018-31, adopting the newly prepared comprehensive plan. Mrs., who would like to make a second?
I'll second it.
Please.
Somebody second, yes.
Waiting for Mr. Henry to.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, okay.
I was going through it again.
Want to jump.
I just wanted to make sure everybody understood what we're doing here, so there are no questions. Any additional board comments or questions?
I call for the question, Mr. Chairman.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Congratulations, the comprehensive plan is adopted.
Thank you very much.
Thank
We
you,
really
sir.
appreciate your work.
Thank you. That is a significant achievement, so thanks again to everybody involved. And with that, we will move on to item E on our agenda, a request from Shealy Homes, Inc. We've been talking about the need to make some improvements to roadways at Tuscan Villas. Mr. Wolf.
Yes, board members, staff brought to you a month or so ago a recommendation to act upon an improvement guarantee posted for Tuscan Villas. Specifically, staff believes that the improvement of the to-be public streets needs to occur, and that those streets have been left with a base course now for many years, and it's staff's belief that with the homes that have been built, the residents do deserve a right to have a finished product. The board authorized acting on the bond at that time. Mr. Mark Shealy, current developer of Tuscan Villa, then appeared before the board at the last business meeting and requested an extension. The board instructed Mr. Healy to make an official request, which he has, and noted that the board would not consider such a request until residents have been notified, which they have been. So now is the time for Mark Shealy to make his case before the Board of Supervisors in regard to his request not for the township not to act on the improvement guarantee for Tuscan Villa.
Good evening. My name's Mark Shealy. I'm the developer of Tuscan Villas. My address is 5405 Joshua Road, Mechanicsburg. And yes, I'm asking to allow my company to get the roads paved. We have an estimate for $73,000 from Hemp Brothers, who's going to do the work the end of September. And I wish not to have my letter of credit pulled, which is for $131,000. So if we can be granted to get these roads paved by end of September.
Mr. Wolf, when we last discussed this, the question was if this were not accomplished by the end of September, would our contractor still be able to accept the change order to allow the township to complete the paving before the end of the paving season?
I have asked the Public Works Director to speak to Pensy Supply, who is our current contractor. Pensy has completed road paving of all township streets under its current contract, but is willing at this point in time to hold the contract open and pave the streets in the fall. I do not believe that Pensy will be able to hold the contract open until December, awaiting a decision. I'm sorry, until September, waiting such a decision.
Okay, well,
If I could make
so basically, if you don't do it, it isn't going to get done, and that's not, I don't believe, an acceptable situation to the board.
Well, Mr. Shealy, we had told the residents that no matter what, it would be done this year. And now we just wanted to see if there was some assurance that if you tried to do it and couldn't do it, that we could still have time to do it. And it doesn't sound like that we would. So I think we're at the end of the line as far as giving extensions.
Mrs. Lindsay, you had.
Yeah, Mr. Shealy, I'm just looking back, putting myself living out there, and they've been there for quite a few years without the second layer. And if it wouldn't have come to our attention, I think it would still keep going on, that the second layer would not be put there. So, my question is, why didn't you do it before? You were obligated to do it, and it wasn't done.
I would prefer the wait because the development is only approximately 50% built out. So I would like to wait till next year. That way there's not damage to the streets, and I know you aren't going to wait for that, so.
When was the last house that was built?
The last house was just sold about 4 months ago.
Okay, but how long has it been sitting there before it got sold?
Probably for 18 months approximately.
Yeah, and nothing has been built since. So, you're saying about being built out for next year. If nothing has been built in the past 18 months, who's saying that down the road you're even going to have the houses built?
We do have one house to start in the next 60 days.
Yeah.
And I have another builder who's buying 2 lots, at least 2, maybe 3. So there'll be a lot of activity. Yeah, I'd prefer to wait till more construction's done, so there's less damage. But if we have to get it completed by September, that does give me enough time to take care of it.
When we had this before us last month, we did agree to go ahead and the township would take care of it, so I am in favor of doing that. I don't want these residents to have to wait any longer.
Well, I asked the solicitor, we did make a decision that we would go ahead and exercise the letter of credit, and we would go forward and pave the road. So if we in fact want to go ahead and have the road paved under our current contract and get it done, we need to do nothing other than, so the only thing that we would need to do is if we were going to change it to allow Mr. Shealy to do it, that would require a motion. But no motion means we're going to exercise the letter of credit because we've already voted to do that. So I guess with that, do you have anything else to add?
Well, yeah, I'm asking for your permission. If you can't give me till the end of September, at least by September 15th.
No, the problem, Mr. Shealy, is that we cannot wait any longer and have our contractor do it this season. And since we have no guarantee that it will be done, if you fail to do it, then that means it's not going to happen until next year. And we made a commitment to the residents that that would not occur.
The reason we delayed it a little bit was to see if maybe if you tried to do it and couldn't do it, that we could still have time to have it done with our contractor this year, which is what we told the residents. And it looks like we can't do that. And I know you're in a tough business.
Yeah, we
I
understand
really,
that.
I'm hoping going forward that you'll be successful and sell some more properties. But we can't ask the residents to wait any longer.
So with that, I mean, unless somebody wants to make a motion to change the decision we made, then we're going to exercise the letter of credit and fix the road. Would anybody like to make a motion? I guess that's your answer.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, with that, we'll move to item F. Mr. Wolf, I want to talk about a declaration.
Board members, we had an extremely unusual wet weather period of time from July 21st through July 25th. Depending upon the reports and where you lived, as much as 9 inches of rain fell in Lower Paxton Township during that period of time.
Wow.
We had, and our neighboring communities had even more significant amounts of stormwater. Lower Paxton Township had 3 roads that were closed and damaged. We had sanitary sewer system that was completely surcharged with more manhole overflows than we've had in 6 or 7 years. State Department of Environmental Protection has determined that those manhole overflows will not be a finable offense, that they will be forgiven based upon an act of God, which was the wet weather event. We had significant numbers of property owners that had basement damage, stormwater in their basements. Property owners had lot damage as well. As a result, I believed it was necessary to declare an emergency condition in Lower Paxton Township for those days. Such emergency condition puts Lower Paxton Township and its residents potentially in a more favorable position should there be a PEMA or FEMA emergency declaration for those days and financial resources be provided to those who have had property damage. With that, the Township Manager's Ordinance allows the manager to make such a declaration as long as the Board of Supervisors then reaffirms the declaration at its next business meeting, which would be this evening. As such, I ask that the Board of Supervisors act to reaffirm the emergency declaration number 1 for this year, declaring emergency conditions in Lower Paxton Township for July 21st through July 25th.
With that, is there a motion to reaffirm the emergency declaration?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it is essential that we do this in order, as Mr. Wolf has explained, to apply for any emergency money or grant money as a result of this. So I will move that we approve Declaration 2018-01, which reaffirms the emergency declaration by Mr. Wolf under the Act to the wet weather conditions between July 21st and the 25th, 2018.
So moved. Is there a
I'll
second?
second.
Thank you, Mr. Judd. Any additional board member comments or questions? Anybody from the public wish to comment or ask a question on the issue? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? So passed.
Mr. Chairman, just one final note in regard to this. The Public Works Director, engineering, our engineering technician, and myself will be discussing this event in greater detail at our workshop meeting next Tuesday night.
Great. Thank you. Item G under old business, Resolution 2018-33, authorizing the sale of fire apparatus to the Colonial Park Fire Company. Mr. Wolf.
Board members, you have completed the purchase of 3 pieces of firefighting apparatus in accordance with Phase 4 of your fire equipment capital plan. All 3 units are in service, and the Colonial Park, Paxtonia, and Linglestown fire companies have new firefighting apparatus. The apparati that were replaced for Linglestown and Paxtonia, those units were able to be sold through processes that were with under the township's control. The Colonial Park engine, for a number of reasons, has not been able to be sold, and we are coming upon an issue where that the unit needs some work. The generator on it does not work. That's problematic. And the township, our ability to sell it relies on competitive bid process. The board could, and by this resolution, I am requesting that you allow the transfer of this unit to the Colonial Park Fire Company for $1. Once it's transferred, the fire company will then list the unit with a broker that sells fire apparatus, and the fire company in the sale of the piece of equipment is not bound by the state bidding law for sale of equipment that it owns. And Lower Paxton Township can legally sell equipment to a fire company without bidding. We believe that a broker will have a easier time of marketing this piece of equipment than Lower Paxton Township has, and a broker may also be in a position to market equipment off of the firefighting apparatus, this piece of equipment that has value, and still sell the truck separately, things that we don't have the capability of doing. Any proceeds from this sale by this resolution are required to come back to the Fire Equipment Capital Fund. The fire company is aware of that. And of course, board members, your protection is that you give money to the fire company should they fail to reimburse the fund. You have the ability to withhold money. So this is a unique way to provide for a sale of a piece of equipment that if the township proceeds along its current course, it's not going to find an acceptable buyer. We believe that through a broker, which the township can't retain, but the fire company can, we can get the best sale price for the vehicle benefiting the Fire Equipment Capital Fund.
The process obviously maximizes the best financial gain for us.
And I know this is the first time we've ever done this, so be anxious to see what the proceeds are that come back, so.
Thank you for a very thorough explanation, Mr. Wolf. Do we have a motion to approve Resolution 1833?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve Resolution 2018-33, which authorizes the sale of the fire apparatus to Colonial Park Fire Company for the disposition through a private sale as outlined by Mr. Wolf.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any additional board member questions or comments? Would any member of the public like to ask a question or make a comment? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Nobody opposed. We now want to take a look at Ordinance 2018-02. This would amend the Volunteer Service Tax Credit Program as it applies to residential property. And for an explanation, again, we'll call on Mr. Wolf and Mr. Stein to explain the proposed changes to Ordinance 1802 or adoption thereof.
Briefly, board members, as previously discussed, in implementing this program, which was adopted last year, it was determined that there were several flaws in the ordinance that prevented proper implementation. As a result, the amendments before you here this evening are corrective in nature so that we can have proper implementation. The amendments are as followed. In the definition of qualified real property, it adds a qualifier that any non-residential use of said property, except for a legally existing major or minor home occupation for no impact or for no home impact-based business as regulated by the Lower Paxton Township zoning ordinance, shall disqualify said property from eligibility in the volunteer service credit program. Prior to that provision, it would have been possible for somebody living in a commercial property to actually claim a credit for the property. The program is intended for residential properties. Then under the application process, the previous ordinance had different dates that made it impossible to actually properly apply. We're taking out applications not accepted after April 1st and making the application deadline December 31st. And then with that change, the rest of the ordinance falls into place, and failure to submit an application by December 31st shall disqualify the volunteer and his property from participation in the program for the fiscal year that there ends. And then finally, under the tax credit itself for real property, if the tax is paid in the discount period, the credit shall only apply to the amount paid. If the tax is paid in penalty, the tax credit shall be applied to the base tax liability, and under no circumstances shall a tax credit be paid for a property in delinquency. So those are items that we discussed in our previous workshop session on this matter. They're now here before you in ordinance form for action. It would be appropriate for Mr. Stein to briefly conduct a public hearing prior to board action.
Thank you. This is the time and date set for the public hearing on Ordinance 18-02, which would amend the Volunteer Service Tax Credit Program as it applies to residential property. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to be heard on Ordinance 18-2? Seeing no response, Mr. Chairman, it would be in order at this time to close the public hearing on Ordinance 18-02, and the board may take action if it so desires.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Thank you, Mr. Wolf. The chair would entertain a motion for adoption of Ordinance 2018-02.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve Ordinance 2018-02, which is amending Article 4, Chapter 185 of the Code of Ordinances, entitled the Volunteer Service Tax Credit Program, as created originally by Ordinance 2017-15, as presented by Mr. Wolf and Mr. Stein.
So moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Judd. Any additional comments or questions from members of the board?
Once the ordinance goes into effect in the next 5 days, then will we be accepting applications?
Yes, and we'll accept them through December 31st for any eligible volunteer firefighter.
Okay, and the chiefs will be made aware that
Yes.
this ordinance has been passed? Okay.
Any additional questions or comments? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? So moved. So approved. We'll now move to new business, and we need to take action on renewal of the 2018-2019 PennDOT Municipal, I don't want to talk about winter, winter traffic services agreement. Mr. Wolf.
Yes, board members, this is an annual extension of a 5-year agreement that provides for the township to maintain certain state routes: Rutherford Road, Colonial Road, Locust Lane, Union Deposit Road, Nye Road, Blue Ridge Avenue, and Mountain Road. For our winter maintenance activities, the state will compensate us a total of,
$1,149,000.
I'm sorry, Mr. Crispin?
$1,149,000.
No,
Isn't it usually 27,500?
It's about,
That's just one of them.
yeah,
Where's the, I don't know where the GT is.
the total reimbursement comes to roughly $35,000.
Okay, because I know last year it was
Yes.
27.5,
They
because I
give you-
asked.
They give us a rate per mile, and I thought they actually had it all computed out at the bottom, and I was
I
wrong.
looked for it, I didn't see it.
But we've been in this program with PennDOT for many years. I can tell you that they do not pay us a sufficient amount of money to actually provide for the maintenance of these routes. But I can also tell you that we drive over these roads to get to our residential neighborhoods long before PennDOT will get to them, because they're minor roads in PennDOT's eyes. And if we're driving over roads that are snow-covered and don't plow them, to go plow out a neighborhood when people can't drive the main road, we have significant problems. I think it's in our best interest to continue the winter maintenance service agreement with PennDOT, and I request your approval this evening.
I asked this last year, and I'll ask it again. There's no way that we can get the updated, the money, a little bit more?
We can't negotiate independently. They provide the same rate to everybody across the state.
All right.
And I apologize, Mr. Wolf, when I gave you the 1 million figure, I didn't really read the column title, which was the rate per MFC.
$1 million would be a good deal.
I know.
I was gonna say, if they're gonna give us
It was
that.
just wishful thinking on my part.
Would you like to put the $1 million in your motion?
Absolutely. Be more than happy to do so.
With that, can we have a motion on action to renew the 2018-2019 PennDOT Municipal Winter Traffic Services Contract or Agreement?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the renewal of the 2018-19 PennDOT Municipal Winter Traffic Services Agreement as presented by Mr. Wolf.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Judd. Any additional questions or comments from the board?
May I amend to 1 million?
What's that? No, you may not amend to 1 million. We'd like to. Any public question or comment? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
That was an aye? Okay. That takes us to item C, Resolution 2018-32. And this would authorize execution of an automated red light enforcement program. Oh, wait a minute.
I think you
skipped
missed one.
We're
Yeah.
actually on B.
Okay.
South Central.
I put my slash mark in the wrong spot. First, we want to take action on renewal of the Emergency Management Services Agreement with South Central Emergency Management. Mr. Wolf.
Yes, we have received from South Central this request for renewal. It's at no increase in cost for services. Jason has recommended that the board take action this evening, and I certainly support this, as well as Public Safety Director Koshiba. It discontinues service for 1 year at the same rate of service, and South Central EMS is the one making the request.
Is it for 1 year? I thought it was for 2.
It's actually 2 years.
2, okay, I thought it was 2.
And this form of agreement is the same form we've used on biannual renewals for the last several years.
I just want to say one thing before we make the motion. We're very fortunate to have South Central EMS. They do between 4 and 5 rigs a day in Lower Paxton Township, close to 400 and 500 calls a month in Lower Paxton Township. So I want to thank them, and Chief Campbell is doing a wonderful job out there at South Central EMS.
Any questions or comments from the board? Chair would entertain a motion to adopt Resolution 2018-32. I'm wanting to get to that. The chair will accept the motion to take action on renewal of the Emergency Services Agreement with South Central Emergency Management Services.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we approve the renewal of the emergency service agreement with SCEMS, South Central, for a 2-year period.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Mrs. Lindsay. Any public questions or comments on the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? And now I'm anxious to hear about the resolution authorizing execution of the Automated Red Light Enforcement Program funding agreement. That's
Board members, PennDOT, through the reference grant program, will provide Lower Paxton Township $63,748 for software and hardware to better coordinate the 3 signals, King George, Valley Road, and Crumbs Mill, Devonshire Road, on Colonial Road, so that they function better. Now, when I say better, it's not going to be massive wholesale improvement. This is a stopgap improvement to provide better flow of traffic until the parties can get together to do massive wholesale reconstruction of those two of the three intersections.
That's not the answer I wanted.
You should be happy with that, Mr. Chrisman.
No, that's not good enough. I like the one he started with.
Well, we're trying.
Is it
We're
approx-
trying, Mr. Chrisman.
I've heard
We are
that.
trying to make it easier for
Was
you
it
to get in and out of
approximately
your roadway there.
61,000?
63, 748.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
You
That
ready?
should help, Mr. Chrisman.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the efforts on everyone's part.
And
So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be more than happy to move we approve Resolution 2018-32, authorizing the township manager to sign the automated red light enforcement program agreement on our behalf.
so moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded. Any public comments or questions on the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? So approved. And now we're going to move to item D under new business, action on proposals for surveying services for sanitary sewer mini basins. They are delineated on the
Wait a minute.
agenda. I won't read all those numbers and letters, but
You missed one. D. I know you want to get out of here, Mr. Henry.
that's what I just said.
No.
Action on proposal for surveying services.
No, you missed the municipal vehicles?
No, we did 1832. That was C. We're on item D.
Okay, but I have 1834, authorizing the sale of four.
No, I'm on under new business, item D.
Right.
Action on,
We've got
I
a,
was gonna say,
yeah.
my D says
Printed and the
different
electronic
resolution.
are
Okay.
different.
oh, okay, so
On our hard copy.
the hard copy and the electronic copies are not,
Right.
That's our fault. We apologize. We can do either one at this time.
Okay, and I was,
we're easily confused, George, at this
I
hour of the
do
night, so.
Mr. Henry, just a
But
point of
I'm really
order.
anxious to get on with doing surveying services, so if we could take that first, I would appreciate
We
it.
could,
Thank
board
you,
members.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was following the chair's lead because I was also using hard copy.
Some of us are paper people and some are
Yes, we are.
electronic.
Sorry.
We won't have any age comments here, though.
Just because you're older than
Board
I am.
members, Mr. Weaver in the sewer department has solicited proposals from engineering firms to provide surveying services in certain, that's BC 7A, BC, D, and 8A, C, and D, sanitary sewer mini basins. These surveys are required to provide base mapping for which GHD will then do sanitary sewer designs for mini basin improvement projects. The lowest responsible proposal has been received by Act One Associates. It's in the amount of $53,100. You'll see that Act One submitted an original proposal at $43,100. Staff reviewed that proposal and had a question after its review. Act One was found to have not completely understood part of the request and had to revise their proposal. And in doing so, Act One was not aware of anybody else's submission and gave a revised response of $53,100, which is still $10,000 less than the next lowest respondent. Board members, these are professional service activities. You don't require a competitive bid for this. It was done by an RFP process, which does allow you to question the applicant and negotiate in regard to the actual cost. It's staff's recommendation that the board accept the proposal from Act One Associates as listed on revised in the amount of $53,100.
Is there a reason why there was such a large difference? That the high bid was almost $110,000 and the low bid is $53,000?
There's two answers to that. First of all, in the past when we have done this, we do see a wide range. And I think it often depends upon what work people have and, you know, if they're hungry for work, they give you a good price. If they're not, they don't. Also, Act One is a firm that we're familiar with. They do a lot of this work. They're very familiar with Lower Paxton Township. I believe because of that familiarity, they were, and knowledge of what we do, they were able to give a more precise number than some of the others. For instance, KHA Inc. Has not worked for Lower Paxton Township, to my knowledge, in the past. So,
But we do have reference and we have experience with Act One.
yes, we have very significant amount of familiarity with Act One.
Mr. Wolf, I know it's in Beaver Creek. Can you kind of give us a plan of where it's at?
BC 7 and 8, and I can't give you exact areas, but it's the southeast quadrant of Lower Paxton Township. Beaver Creek runs from north to south on the eastern line of Lower Paxton Township. BC 1 is Linglestown, and the BCs then follow in order down to, I believe, a BC 9 at the bottom, which would be roughly almost Derry Street. So BC 7 and 8 are South Nyes Road in that general area.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the board? Would any member of the board care to make a motion to accept one of these proposals?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the proposal from Act One and Associates in the amount of $53,100 for surveying services for BC 7A, B, C, and D, and BC 8A, C, and D of the sanitary sewer mini basins as presented.
Could you repeat that?
No.
Yeah, that's quite a mouthful. It has been moved. It's getting late. Is there a second?
Second.
Any additional board member questions or comments? Any public questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? No. All right, now, depending on your version of the agenda, we'll go to proposed resolution 2018-34. This would authorize the sale of 4 municipal vehicles, these being Ford F-350 trucks.
Board member.
Loomis, you know what those are, don't you? You've seen them before.
This just provides authorization to Enterprise Fleet Management to take these vehicles to the Mannheim Auto Auction and sell them on our behalf. We have found this to be a better way to sell our vehicles than us doing it by our own sealed bid process.
And this is all part of the lease program?
Yes.
Okay. Are we almost finished with selling what we have, that we're almost at?
No, we're about halfway.
We're halfway, okay.
Okay, any board member questions or comments?
Just a question before I form the motion. Mr. Wolf, is this always included that it will in fact go to Mannheim Auto Auction? Otherwise, I want to simply make the motion that we authorize the sale of the 4 municipal vehicles, even though it's stated at the Mannheim. Is that essential?
Yes, because
Okay.
these vehicles will actually be driven to Mannheim and put on a line for auction there.
Yeah, thank you for the question, or for the clarification on the question. You ready, Ms.? Ready?
If you'd like, go ahead, please make a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve Resolution 2018-34, which authorizes the sale of the 4 municipal vehicles as identified, the Ford F-350 trucks at the Mannheim Auto Auction as presented by Mr. Wolf.
So moved. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any additional board member questions or comments? Any questions or comments from the public? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Hearing none. And now we have subdivision and land development plans, and we've had people waiting very patiently through a long agenda. Thank you for that. We will begin with the preliminary and final subdivision plan for Red Lobster. And who is going to handle? Yes, sir. Please identify yourself.
I will do that. Thank you, Mr. Henry. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dave Guest, an attorney with the law firm of Wiswanger and Widener here in Harrisburg, representing the developer of the Colonial Park Mall. With me is Rennie Scher, who's the project engineer. Your staff has provided us with a package of information, Mr. Chrisman, that we have reviewed, and we are in agreement with the couple of comments that still remain, that there are really just 2 things to talk about that we'd like to focus on. We have three waiver requests. One is on the size of the plan. The Planning Commission and your township staff had no problem with that one. The other two relate to sidewalk. We had requested a waiver of sidewalk on the property. It was the recommendation of the Planning Commission, after an extended discussion, to recommend that the waiver be granted only with respect to the mall property itself and not with respect to the Red Lobster property. The Red Lobster sits out here in the corner. The Planning Commission recommended sidewalk along that parcel, kind of to the two driveways, and not for the rest of the property. We pointed out then, and I will repeat, and you've already heard it mentioned a couple times this evening, that the Colonial Park Mall was a mall in transition, and we would much prefer to save our money at this point and focus it into long-term plans for the entire mall, particularly with the imminent departure of Bonton. CVS has left in the not-too-distant past. I would also mention that although the mall extends from here to here, the property that we own only goes to the jewelry store. This is the Sears is owned by a separate entity, so that's not ours. We only have, basically, we're Boscov's and Bonton and in between, but not the wing out to the end. So we requested a waiver of the street tree requirement and the sidewalk requirement. The Planning Commission recommended both trees and sidewalk on the property that we were going to be subdividing. The reason we're subdividing this is there's a long-term lease on that property right now. It's been leased for many years to Red Lobster. That lease has a couple of years to go. The Red Lobster could use a facelift. The landlord, us, doesn't really want to put a lot of money into a refresh without the guarantee of a long-term lease. The tenant doesn't want to put a lot of money into renovating the property without the guarantee of a long-term lease. And there has been a lot of interest in selling that parcel so that the Red Lobster owner or someone affiliated with them can buy it and then hold it long-term and then do the refresh that they'd like to do. The money that would come to the mall can then be start of the money to do whatever's going to need to be done out here. And we don't know the answer to that question right now, but actively looking for some people to fill the space. And the action you took in the comprehensive plan tonight certainly gives us some flexibility that we didn't have about 2 hours ago.
Yes, we're very interested in what is going to occur there, and I know the Planning Commission has been discussing this as we have on the board, and the flexibility we hope will be helpful, and certainly we're open for additional discussions going forward, because we think it's in the best interest of the township that this mall remains vibrant and healthy. That's at the gateway to our township, so we are very concerned and interested in the future of this.
Well, and I did have a conversation with the chair of the Planning Commission at the Planning Commission meeting a couple of months ago, and we renewed our acquaintance earlier this evening. Excellent. And we don't know what's going to happen there, and my client doesn't know what's going to happen, but there's a lot of space going to be empty pretty soon.
Yeah, there is.
And that's, I mean, as I said, the CVS has already left, and so it's ripe for something, and we're actively looking for what that something is, and tonight's action is the beginning of giving us some additional flexibility with that.
Do we have any questions?
I do.
Mrs. Lindsay?
I have two things. So the required parking spaces, you don't have enough, but township staff allowed that to happen, am I right?
Not exactly.
Okay.
There is, on the entire property that we currently own, not counting the Boscov's roof, because that's owned by Randy, another separate entity, right? Boscov's owned their building, and there is rooftop parking, which we didn't count. But when you count the parking on the property that my client owns, there is enough parking for both the mall and for the Red Lobster for the count. When you then, however, when you draw a line around the Red Lobster, then there's not enough parking for the Red Lobster in that parcel.
Okay, I guess that's
So-
what I was getting at.
Right, so there is a easement agreement that is drafted, that's been submitted to the township, I believe the solicitor has seen it, that will allow the Red Lobster to use certain parking spaces in the mall parking lot. But even without those spaces, the mall still has more spaces than it needs under the township ordinances.
Okay. And then I have another question about the sidewalks. I've been sitting on this board for 5.5 years, and all I keep hearing is we have to connect, we have to connect. We have a property owner out on Lingelstown Road that has been before us, and we keep telling him we need to connect. So if we allow you not to put the sidewalks down through the mall, then how do we tell all the other property owners when they come? And they say, well, you've allowed him not to do it, but we're making you do it. And I was born and raised here, and I'll tell you what, there's a lot of people walking right now. There are a lot of motorized wheelchairs on Route 22, more than I've ever seen. So I just feel if our ordinance says you have to put the sidewalks, I feel they need to be put there.
Well,
Because people are walking.
If I can respond to that, and we had this discussion at the Planning Commission at length, candidly, it's a lot safer to be on the edge of the parking lot of the mall than it is to be 4 feet from Lingelstown, or from Jonestown Road. At least at times I've driven it, not currently right now because of the construction on the bridge, but when I drive through there, I'm usually being passed, and I'm driving the speed limit. And so if I was a pedestrian, I would not want to be walking 3 or 4 feet from the traffic. I would rather be up in the mall.
And I would not want to be in the mall parking lot because people are nuts. They're not paying, seriously, they're not paying attention, they're texting, they're in a hurry to get down to the other end of the mall.
Well, and
I would rather be walking on the sidewalk. At least I know I'm on the sidewalk and I'm safe. In the parking lot, you don't know if you're safe.
Although people driving cars are probably texting as well when they're coming
Well,
down.
I know, but
Jonestown
I'm
Road.
hoping that, driving the car, but the sidewalk will have a curb, they'll would have to jump up to the curb to get onto the sidewalk. But I just, I know we have 2 new board members here, but for the
It's still not
past-
going to connect, though, because it only goes apart, not
It
even
only goes-
halfway, it only goes halfway across.
It only goes to there, and when
I'm more concerned on Colonial Road.
well, if I can address that, when you go down Colonial Road, there's actually not enough grass space between the parking lot and the street to put a sidewalk in some of it. Randy, you can speak to that maybe better than I can, but I drove back here very carefully. Actually, I drove through the mall parking lot so that I wouldn't be hindrance to traffic a couple months ago. And some of the grass, Randy, it's what, in through here? It's, the grass strip is only inches of maybe a foot and a half wide. And that's from when it was built back in the first place. And I think that as we get into looking at what we're gonna do with this, we're not proposing any construction here. All we're doing is drawing, a line in the air. And so it's not a matter of we're doing some construction, because there really is no construction planned here. I would note that when this property went in, that sidewalk only goes to, there's a bus stand right here, and the sidewalk goes out to the traffic light and stops. So the sidewalk won't be connected anyway. And I think it's probably better to defer this whole question for the mall itself until we come in and are doing something with the mall, because there's going to be something done with the mall. I can't tell you, I can't represent what it is or when that's going to be, because we don't know right now.
I just think more sidewalk is better. We have 2 properties, like one part of it is in Lower Paxton, over on Union Deposit Road. They are at the mall. They are adding sidewalks from one end to the other. And Best Buy, they didn't have much room either, but I saw that they have now put in sidewalks along their whole front of the property on Route 22. Yeah,
Well,
so.
at least we would be getting sidewalks on that corner there on the 2 sides of the Red Lobster, which we don't presently have. So that's a bit of progress. Yeah, I agree that we need to connect these sidewalks. I mean, that definitely is what we have to do. But given the fact that there's ultimately going to be something happening with that mall,
Loman, that could be 10
I can
years.
see waiting until that redevelopment occurs.
What if that doesn't happen for 10 years?
It may not.
seriously.
Well, if you turn the plan down, it won't happen now either.
Right. My thing is that we're telling other businesses they have to put the sidewalks in. We're making them put them in. And once we start setting a precedence that you don't have to put the sidewalk in, but you have to put the sidewalk in.
Well, that's,
Well, the
we
Red
have to
Lobster
be.
will.
Yeah, but I'm saying the mall.
But the mall is, I mean, that store up front there is closing.
Yeah.
I mean, this is
It's closed
not
now, but what if somebody goes and opens a store in it?
it's not a new business coming in like the others are. It's not new construction like the others are. I mean, what if we, they could put it in and then we redesign it or reimagine it and we find a new use for it and you end up ripping it out. I agree, I am 100% for sidewalks. And the township grew in such a way that there weren't many sidewalks. I don't have many sidewalks in my neighborhood. My kids used to go to school within a stone's throw from where we lived, and you couldn't go. You can't walk to the grocery store from where we live. This is a major priority for me. This, to me, is a special situation. We have to recognize the uniqueness of it. This is not setting a precedent, not making a special exception when you consider the history and the future of this particular land. I think it's very easy to explain to another property owner why we allow a waiver for this. I think it'd be very easy. I think it's common sense. I think I know you have to be consistent when the facts are consistent, when the specifics are consistent, but that's not the case here. This is a unique situation, and to put them in and rip them out, I don't think that's.
I disagree with you with ripping them out because they're going to be right along the road where people are going to be walking. So that's just my opinion.
Well, I'll get back to the fact that at least we're going to have sidewalks in front of the restaurant on both Colonial Road and Route 22, which we don't have now. So approving the plan gets us more than what we currently have. If we turn it down, even that won't occur. And clearly something's going to occur with the mall. I don't think it's going to be 10 years.
We hope not.
The retail environment has changed and is changing rapidly. And I would be surprised if we go more than a couple of years before something significant occurs here. You're certainly not going to want to sit with an empty anchor store for 10 years.
No, we're not.
No, you're not.
Mr. Henry, that would not be a good situation.
No, not for anyone. Mr. Chrisman, do you have any comments or questions?
My comments are simply to say that on items 2 and item 3, I support the Planning Commission's recommendation.
Okay, wait a minute. Waiver requirement. The applicant is requesting a waiver of the planned scale. You don't support the changing of the scale?
No, in exception 2, it says sidewalk will be required for the Red Lobster parcel only and not for the entire mall property. And for the tree,
No, I'm looking
it
at the
says the street trees will be required for the Red Lobster parcel only and not the entire mall parcel.
And you support those two items?
Because it's coming from the Planning Commission, those people, in my opinion, are the experts in the field. I want to support their recommendation.
Okay, are there any additional questions or comments from the board? Does any member of the public have a question or comment while we have? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
At which point the chair would entertain a motion on the preliminary and final subdivision plan for Red Lobster.
Before we do have a question for the
Oh,
applicant. Mr. Getz, would you please return? I have a series of questions I need to review.
Oh, yes.
First of all, Mr. Getz, are you able to speak on behalf of the applicant?
I am, yes, sir.
Good. And I don't like to make assumptions, so I'm going to ask you directly that you do, in fact, have before you the preliminary and final subdivision plan that we all have sitting here.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Then let me review, and I need for you to respond so that it can be recorded. There are 3 waiver requests here. You can, in request number 1, the staff does support that. In number 2 and number 3, there is a recommendation for the Planning Commission. Are you willing to agree to that?
We are, yes, sir.
You are?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. There are 3 administrative comments. My question to you is, and I need again for you to respond, that all of those have either been completed or will be completed in a timely fashion that's acceptable to the administrative staff.
We will complete those in the appropriate amount of time.
Acceptable to the Lower Paxton Township staff that you're working with.
Acceptable to the Lower Township staff that we're working with.
Thank you.
I feel
And-
like I should have my hand up and repeating after you.
Yeah, we may put you under oath.
And finally, are you again either have completed or have committed to completing again at the agreement with staff for the 2 general comments, and specifically number 2, which is the letter from HRG from Jason Hines that have the 6 comments on?
Yes, we agree with the comments from Tri-County Regional Planning Commission and Jason Hintz of HRG. We will comply with those comments.
Okay, I want to make certain that all those things have either been completed or will be completed in the acceptable agreement between you and our administrative staff as the applicant.
And we will, although the plan that you have before you does not have sidewalk on it, we will resubmit to the township, presuming a positive decision on the waiver request as you've been discussing. We'll review with your township staff a plan that shows the sidewalk on the Red Lobster property and also has street trees.
Very good, thank you. Having concluded those answers, Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Please.
Mr. Chairman, I will move to approve the preliminary and final subdivision plan for Red Lobster at 4600 Jonestown Road, Plan 2018-04, with the 3 stated waiver requests, the 3 administrative comments, and the 2 general comments, specifically item 2, which is the letter dated July the 24th, 2018 from Jason Hines, HRG, that the applicant has agreed to all of those, or will, if they have not been completed, will be completed in a timely fashion acceptable to a township staff.
It has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any additional board questions or comments? Any additional staff questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed?
No.
There are 3 ayes and 1 no, so the motion will pass. Thank you. That moves us to improvement guarantees, et cetera, et cetera. There are 6 of them on the list.
Correct.
Anything of note here?
I have not noticed anything. I was going to ask Mr. Wolf if there's anything from staff that makes an exception. Other than if they seem to be rather straightforward. If they're all standard with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the improvement guarantees as presented.
It has been moved that we approve the improvement guarantees as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
And second. Any questions by the board or any public question or comment? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That brings us to the payment of bills for Lower Paxton Township and the Lower Paxton Township Authority. Madam Treasurer.
Yes, I make a motion, we pay the bills for Lower Paxton Township and Lower Paxton Township Authority.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
It has been moved and second that we pay the bills. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? That brings us to announcements. Anybody have any additional announcements they wish to make? Seeing none,
Just a point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
On our, not our hard copy agenda, but our,
Okay,
on
back
our
to that.
printed agenda. Yes, I just caught this, and that's why I'm raising a point of order.
Okay.
That, under Lower Paxton Township and the authority, we have the card check register that should be included in the approval of our, paying of our bills.
and it was not.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
I
I'm
can-
just saying that we just need to include that.
That,
To amend your motion.
Yeah, I'll
please.
amend the motion that the bills are paid with Lower Paxton Township, Lower Paxton Township Authority, and the P cards for the authority and Lower Paxton Township. And I will make a note that that's never been on there before, so this is the first time,
And-
so.
And I'll second.
You will amend your
Yes.
second. So all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, now do we have any additional comments, questions, announcements? Seeing none, is there a motion that we adjourn?
So moved.
Moved, is there a second? Second, all in favor, aye? Aye. Thank you all. Yeah. That was a marathon.